I have always been a night owl. I don't like it particularly, but it's just how I operate. I would much rather be the kind of person that wakes up at 5 a.m. and is able to do everything I need to do in those 3 hours before I need to be at work, but I've literally always been the type that just stays up until 3 a.m. and likes to sleep until almost noon, unfortunately. I also live in a very comfortable neighborhood, one where nothing really ever happens, if that makes sense. It's the kind of place where a lot of people can leave their doors unlocked, for the most part, and it's really not an issue. Everyone here knows everyone else, everyone knows everything that happens, and no one steps out of line. So, naturally, I never thought twice about going out for walks late at night. It was my preferred way to stay fit, get my exercise in. I would go for a walk around the block, take the path around the park, and then head home. Usually this would take about an hour or so, and it was kind of nice to do so in the middle of the night. This event happened late on a Wednesday. I didn't work that night, and I had spent most of the day cleaning up my place, so I wanted to get out of the house and get some fresh air. I let my roommate know where I was going, grabbed my phone and my ID, and I headed out into the cool autumn night. It was pretty dark out. The moon was covered by some fluffy and silver clouds, and the street was pretty much empty. I was doing my usual loop around, earbuds in place, and music playing in my head. I was pretty well lost in my thoughts when I looked up and saw a random guy sitting on the concrete half wall, retaining wall I think it's called, under the glow of a streetlight. He looked to be in his 30s. He had longer and slicked back dark hair, dressed in a pretty standard black shirt and pair of blue jeans. He was just sitting there and staring up at the stars. Now, this wasn't too terribly creepy or anything, just a dude enjoying the night, but I know all of my neighbors, and this guy was not one of them. I didn't think a whole lot of it at first, but I thought maybe he was just a drifter or a family member of one of my neighbors, possibly. However, something about this situation kind of just felt off. Maybe it was him being outside this late at night that was weird to me, but hey, I was out there too, so I guess that would have made me weird as well. As I got closer, he turned to look at me and smiled for a moment before looking back up at the sky. I, again, didn't think much of it at first. Nothing about him other than the fact that he was out here like that sitting under the light giving me any red flags. He had a pretty gleeful smile, and part of me assumed that this guy might legit be having a late night trip, and he was absolutely in love with the universe right at that moment. It was a bit of a weird mix of emotions. I think is how I should put it. I was a bit unnerved, but also thinking this guy was chill based on how happy he looked. As I was walking towards him, he lifted his hand in a friendly wave, and kind of motioned for me to stop. I was a bit hesitant, but I did pause, about 6 or so feet from him, and I pulled out my earphones to see if he had something to say. And he did have something to say. "It's a beautiful night, isn't it?" He glanced back up as he made this comment. I laughed slightly and agreed, saying that the weather was perfect. Then he looked back at me, and he patted the wall next to himself, as if to ask me to sit there by him. I started to decline, saying that I was just out for a quick walk, and he kept that same smile and responded with, "Just for a minute. I would like to just spend a minute with you and sit as brothers, watching the universe around us drift away at a speed unfathomable to our sad little brains." At this point, I decided that this guy was definitely high. That was the kind of philosophical mentality one of my friends would start to have when he got stoned. I thought about it and figured, if nothing else, this dude just needed some companionship for a couple of moments while he tripped. So, I sat down. I was a couple inches away from him. He smiled and nodded, as if I had done the right thing, and we both kind of looked up at the night sky for like 45 seconds. He chuckled a few times, and then around that point he said, "It's crazy how our lives are nothing more than the outcome of our seemingly random choices. I chose to sit here. You chose to take a walk. And now, we are choosing to enjoy each other's company for just a moment." Again, a bit heavy, but it did seem nice to think about. After another minute or two, I mentioned that I really should go ahead and get going, that I needed to get around the block and get home before my roommate started thinking something happened. I stood up, and he thanked me for spending the moment with him. I said it was no problem, and started to walk away towards the corner. And that's the minute when everything went black. I have no memory of anything beyond standing up and walking towards the corner. And then the next thing I remember seeing was the flashlight shining in my eyes and hearing someone say, "Hey, you're gonna be okay. Can you hear me?" It took what felt like a very long time for me to realize that I was lying on the concrete, and that this was a paramedic kneeling on the ground next to me, and that there was a flashing light right next to me on top of an ambulance. The world slowly spun around me, and my brain was struggling to come back fully to the world of consciousness. The paramedic kept talking to me, kept trying to get my focus and asking me if I could talk to him, if I could feel my legs, etc. I just kind of stared at him, and I thought I was talking to him, but I was apparently just staring in silence. They got me on the stretcher and they took me to the hospital, which I will say was the most expensive 10-minute ride that I've ever taken. I think I finally came back fully when I got to the hospital, and the pain on the back of my head was unbearable. I was very confused about the questions that started coming at me from the police. Why were they questioning me? And how the hell did I end up unconscious on the ground like that? And why did my head hurt so bad? After a little bit, things did kind of fall into place. Based on my injuries, I was likely hit in the back of the head with a rock or a brick or something like that. Thankfully, the hit didn't damage my skull or cause any major brain damage. It was just enough to knock me unconscious and leave me with a really gnarly scar on the back of my head. As for who, well, there was only one possible answer. The guy that I sat with for a few moments. I really don't know why he did it. I don't know why he had gone from this loving the vibe kind of guy to just knocking me unconscious with a rock as I walked away. He didn't take anything. All I had was my phone and my ID, and I still had them both when the medics came and got me. My pockets hadn't even been turned out, so robbery certainly was not the motive. I told the cops all that I could. I described the guy, told them about the quick conversation, and everything that I could recall. I gave them my info so that they could contact me with any other questions or whatever, and that was it. I'll say that I never heard from them again, so I don't think they ever caught this guy. It is terrifying to know that this guy had done this for seemingly no reason. For all he knew, I was going to die there on the sidewalk, within mere moments of having that conversation that we'd had, and he didn't care. I think this guy was seriously a psychopath of some kind, and I was a victim of opportunity. I never saw him after that night, and I never heard anything about him. I'm grateful that the hit didn't do any permanent damage beyond the mental trauma that I was left to deal with. It was crazy to me that something so violent had happened in my calm little neighborhood, and that this seemingly happy dude was such a violent individual. But I guess it just goes to show that appearances can certainly be deceiving. I live in a city that is currently going through urban decay and population decline. Therefore, we have a considerable amount of abandoned houses and businesses throughout the city. When I was a teenager, I used to love seeing abandoned buildings, but now they're an eyesore, and they attract a lot of dangerous people to the city. That, and a bunch of YouTubers and TikTokers all looking for clout and to profit off showing the area. Sorry, but it makes me mad when it happens. Especially when the rich kids come in with no self-awareness or respect for anyone else. When I go for a walk at night, I make sure that I'm strapped and I take my dog with me. Wolfie is a mixed breed. He looks angry and vicious. He has a mean, scary bark, and will defend me, but when it comes to his family, he is such a loving and giant goofball. I love Wolfie. It was dark outside, and most people had gone into their homes by then. People don't really like going out late at night. I live with my extended family in one small home, so I'll go stir crazy if I don't get out of the house. I put Wolfie's leash on, and we set out. Whenever you go out at night, you should always make sure that you're aware of your surroundings. I never have pods in when I'm out because I want to hear if someone is getting close. I noticed that there was a light on in one of the abandoned houses. The homeless people will sometimes go in them. Some of them just want to get off the streets and mind their own business, while others destroy them, do drugs, and otherwise screw things up for everyone else. Instinctively, I began to walk just a little faster. Wolfie seemed to notice my change in mood. There were a couple of streetlights there that were out of commission. Naturally, the city wasn't doing their damn job to fix it. I wasn't going to walk where I couldn't see, so I tried to subtly turn around to walk back the way I came when I heard someone call out. Now, there was no way I was going to run or show any signs that I was scared, so I just kept walking. "Hey, B." The voice was loud this time. Wolfie turned and started barking, snarling with his teeth bared. My hand went to rest on top of my gun. I didn't say anything, and I didn't need to say anything. He stopped. He put his hands up and instantly began to back off before he ran off. If he'd been a crack addict or something, there is a chance that he still would have charged at me, but I didn't want to push my luck, so I made my way home. Still, I had the feeling I was being watched, and even followed. Not that I could see anybody. Wolfie was alert, and I knew he was going to keep me safe. Normally I go out for a walk every day, but the day after, I found myself avoiding it. But on the second day, I knew that I had to get out there and face the growing anxiety head on. I took Wolfie out with me, and I did take my gun. The house with the light on was completely dark this time, with no sign that anyone was in there. I figured the homeless man must have moved on. I avoided the parts where I couldn't see, and from a space between the two homes, I heard someone calling out for help. I stopped. It was dark down there, and Wolfie was looking agitated. A part of me wanted to go and help whoever it was, but this was a dangerous city and I needed to protect myself. I wanted to call out to ask what was wrong, but my gut instinct told me to just get out of there. So I did. I made my way home and I called the police when I got there to tell them what I heard. They told me that I was smart not going to see what was wrong, but I asked them to go and see what it was, but Since I wasn't reporting a crime, they weren't too concerned about it. As expected, there was a reason. A neighbor had left the house and went to see what the problem was. She was robbed, and fortunately managed to get away before something worse happened to her. Her son had come home from work and found her in time, thankfully. I'm not really sure of all the details. She is okay and alive, though. Some people say they were going to kill her, while others were saying that they were working for a human trafficking ring. I don't know. I really don't know what would have happened if I wasn't fully aware in that situation. But my guess, I might not be here. To start, I am one of those annoying people that has always been super into fitness and setting personal goals. I bought a fitness tracking watch, the kind that does the whole heart rate monitoring, the sleep tracking, and most importantly, tracks steps. This, of course, meant that I had another goal to hit each day. 10,000 counted steps. No excuses. Of course, I work in an office behind a desk, so I had to be creative sometimes with how I got there. Some nights this meant that I had to bundle up and go out into the darkness for a trip around the block. Possibly two if it was a particularly lazy day. That night, I was a couple thousand steps shy, so I figured why not take a quick walk, knock out those last steps, and then call it a day. I laced up my walking shoes, grabbed my phone, and headed out into the night. It was a chilly night, but not too cold. Perfect walking weather in my mind. The roads were deserted, and I was ready to just spend some time in my head and get that number up to my goal. I was about 5 minutes into the walk when I noticed a car creeping along at a snail's pace, just dragging down the road in the opposite direction of the way I was going. Now, I've seen slow drivers. I've driven at half the speed limit trying to find a house when going down the road. I used to be a delivery driver, but this was something else. This car could have been part of a really slow parade. It was going slow enough that it could have just been in neutral and was coasting on a straightaway that was my road. I stood there and watched as it inched to near where I was standing, and then it got even with me, and it stopped. I half expected the person to roll down the window and ask me for directions. But they didn't. They just sat there. I'm assuming they were staring at me, but I couldn't see through the tint of the windows. I waited for a moment and decided that I didn't really want to test this and see what the hell this person was doing. And I didn't want to be a part of whatever they were planning, so I turned and kept on walking, planning a quick route through a neighbor's yard to get back to my house. When I started walking again, they started once more inching forward at about 1 mile per hour. They continued going the opposite direction of me, so I assumed that whatever that moment they paused was just going to be an awkward moment that we shared. And that was that. I kept going, thinking I was going to be able to hit my goal after all and not cut my walk short. Then, I heard what sounded like a transmission shifting. I turned around and this car was now doing a full K-turn at that same 1 mile per hour pace. At this point, I booked it down the road, making my turns into an easement and up into my backyard. I walked around the house to my front door thinking that there was no way they would have seen me because I had come up the back way. My walk was ruined, sure, and I wasn't going to hit my step goal, but I wasn't going to worry too much about it. Then, it got worse. About 4 to 5 minutes after I'd gotten home, I was sitting on my couch and watching some TV when I heard a car horn honk. I jumped a bit because it sounded close, but I didn't think much of it. Until I heard it again, and then a third time. I opened the curtain in my living room to look outside, and sure enough, that same car was sitting in my driveway, still running, still with its headlights on. And whoever was driving it was just sitting there randomly hitting the horn. I sat there freaking out thinking, how the hell did they figure out where I lived? I came around the back. There is no way they saw me enter my house. With my thoughts being interrupted randomly by the sound of honking. This guy was hitting the horn at seemingly random intervals, holding it for a couple of seconds and then just letting go. I guess to get my attention, or make himself seem threatening. I really don't know what he was doing. Like I said, I was freaking out inside a bit. I had no idea who this was, what they wanted, what they were trying to accomplish. I decided to take action. Well, as much action as I could bring myself to take. I turned on the porch light, hoping that it would scare them off, and I guess that was enough. Because after I did that, I watched as this car backed out of my driveway at that same snail's pace, and just kept on down the road slowly. This guy never sped up. He never revved his engine. He never did anything but go down the road at a literal single mile per hour. And strangely enough, it was probably the scariest thing that I have ever encountered on a night walk. It's almost funny how being outside in the dark can make even the most innocuous things seem unsettling. If this was during the day, I would have assumed that it was just some random old person trying to find a house. But at night, it was seriously terrifying. I didn't call the cops or anything, because it was one of those situations of me thinking that this guy hadn't done anything criminal. He was just driving slow. Sure, it was suspicious, and sure, he parked in my driveway and honked, which was annoying, but I don't think that was worthy of getting the police involved. Thankfully, that was the only time I ever saw that car. They may have ruined my walk for that night, made me not reach my goal for the day, but I didn't let it get to me in the overall grand scheme of things. I guess the only thing to say is, if you are ever out at night, and you feel uncomfortable with the situation, do not ignore it. And don't assume that it's nothing. Stay aware and stay cautious, because you never know what other people are considering doing. I love taking walks at night. Or at least I used to. Not so much anymore after what happened. Every other night, after I have done my duties for the day, I would walk from my apartment, down a few blocks, pass a few shops, maybe get a late night snack from one of them, and wrap around the town back to my apartment. It was a ritual, and it always helped me unwind and be disconnected from my responsibilities. Until now. Last night, I wasn't feeling too good mentally. I'd had a fight with my best friend earlier in the day, and I needed something to take my mind off of it, or just help me think, I guess. I noted that it was getting cold earlier, and knew that I would have to bring a jacket. It was mid-October, after all. I locked my door and set out, opting to go the other way. The long way. Go the long route first, hit the shops at the end before coming home. As I started walking, I realized that I might have made a mistake. The air wasn't that cold, but the wind, it was like little shards of glass hitting my face. I hadn't taken anything out for dinner, and I planned to pick dinner up at one of the passing shops, so I couldn't exactly just go back in. My car hadn't been running very well lately, so walking it was. I did, however, halfway through, make the daring decision to turn around and just go to the shops and go home. No late night stroll, just food, then straight home. As I turned around, I noticed a person on the other side of the street, on the sidewalk, just standing still, staring at the lamppost above him. I picked up the pace when I saw him, hoping that he wouldn't notice so I could quickly pass and get this over with. The air got colder and colder as time went on. I finally passed my apartment again and could see the lights from the shops nearby. I would just go into the deli, get a sandwich and some chips, and leave. From there, I would just head straight home. The random stranger was on my mind and was compelling me further to just get this done quickly. As I was about halfway from my apartment to the shops, I started hearing really quick tapping sounds coming from behind me, which then turned into what sounded like fast-moving footsteps. I spin around to see a figure from the dark charging straight at me on my side of the road. I freaked out and ran as fast as I could. The sound of their heavy breathing and thundering footsteps, it was enough to make me almost pass out right then and there out of fear. I managed to reach the first shop and swing the door open, running to the counter, sobbing and crying, trying to tell the clerk that I was being chased. And then the door opened behind me. I turned around to see the same guy from before, that lurker that was just staring at the street lamp. He was staring right past me at the clerk behind me. "I will give you $100 to not say a word," the weirdo said. My eyes widened in horror, and I turned around to see the clerk now harboring a smirk and staring back at this man. "Son, if you don't get the hell out of my shop, you're gonna wish I called the cops." The relief that went over my body when the clerk said this was overwhelming. And then, the guy charged at me. It was so quick that I didn't have enough time to react. He slammed into me, bear-hugging me, and we both went straight into the counter. He picked me up and tried to carry me out of the store by force. Then, the gunshot rang out. The man let go and we both looked at the clerk, who was now holding a 12-gauge, and it was aimed right at this guy. "Come here, sweetie, I gotcha," the clerk said. I ran to that man as fast as I could and I hid right behind him. "You got 3 seconds to get on the damn ground with your hands on your head before I blow it clean off your goddamn body." The creep stared at us for a second, looking at the clerk, and then back at me, before finally breaking down and crying. He got on the ground, on his stomach, and he put his hands behind his head. "Sweetie, call the cops. I got him," the clerk said to me. I didn't waste time sprinting to the landline on the wall and dialing 911. About 10 minutes later, the police arrived, and they arrested him. They took our statements, and the clerk offered to drive me home. I, of course, accepted. When we pulled up to my apartment, he stopped me before leaving and gave me his card for his shop, and it had the shop number on it, as well as his cell phone number. "If, for whatever reason, you need help, I'm always there. Don't hesitate to call." I thanked the man for saving me, and he drove off. Now, it's the next morning, and I just don't know how to heal yet from what happened. But I want to thank that shopkeeper who saved my life, and I will definitely call him if I get into any trouble again. So, that, my friends, was a collection of some walking at night, or late night walk stories. I documented it on my calendar as late night walks, but it might just be walking at night because, I don't know. I think that's what I put on the thumbnail. It is. And I like it. I like the way that looks better than late night walk stories. It's more balanced in text. Yeah. Anyways, that was a collection of stories that happened while people went for late night walks. Some scary stuff that happens out there sometimes. Personally, I like walking at night. I never go alone. It's always with patients, obviously. And, yeah. I'm not going to do a knock on wood moment here, but I mean, nothing has happened in this neighborhood, thankfully. Hopefully nothing ever does. You know, that's possible, but I don't know. But my point is, I'm not going to keep talking about that. I'm just going to say that I prefer walking at night myself, so I totally get the reasoning as to why these people go out to walk at night, because it's just nicer. I don't like walking in the sun. It gets too bright and too hot, unless it's winter, in which case it's kind of nice, but I don't know. I'm more of a night person whenever it comes to that stuff, so. I don't like staying up late, though. I know, I'm a bit of a weirdo. Is what it is. Hopefully you all enjoyed these stories. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button. I would appreciate that. If you're new to the channel and really liked what you heard, you could also subscribe, as that helps the channel grow tremendously. And if you're feeling ever so bold, as I say, down below the video there's a comment section. You can leave me a comment, letting me know your thoughts. Which story was the scariest to you? Have you ever had anything like this happen to you? If you have, and don't just want to leave it in a comment and would like me to actually read it and narrate it, then send it to me. AsTheRavenDreams.com, there's a button that says submit your story. I'll also accept them and just email if you just want to email me at astheravendreams@gmail.com. It's the good email address to get to me. Yeah. Anyways, friends, I hope you remember you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you're the best you that you can be. Do not forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And of course, until I see you again, much love, and sleep well.